From data rails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Today. I am your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A guy, and you are listening to FP&A Today. FP&A Today is brought to you by Data Rails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis and discuss some of the biggest stories and challenges in the world of FP&A. We will provide you with actionable advice about financial planning and analysis today. This is going to be your go-to resource for everything FP&A. I am thrilled to welcome today's guest on the show, Gabriela Gutierrez. Gabriela, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul, for having me. Very happy and excited to be here.
Well, we're really excited to have you. So let me just give a little bit about Gabriela's background. She's currently working in Germany, but she has lived and worked all over the place. She grew up in Ecuador. She went to college in the U.S. in the Boston area, I think both Boston and Babson College. And then she did an MBA in Spain at EA Business School. She moved to Germany for work and has been working for a company that looked like it just spun off, but was originally owned by eBay. And I'll let her talk a little bit about that. But that's a little bit about her background. So maybe can you tell us just a little bit more about yourselves, take us through your career and how you ended up where you're at?
Sure. So actually, when I was a teenager, at the end of high school, it was kind of the time to decide what do you want to study. And funny enough, I was always struggling between going into more into science, something would be finance or engineering, or more into art or fashion. So I always had this kind of a struggle. At the end, obviously, finance won the race. And I made the decision. But at first, I studied business administration. And then when I needed to do some internships, all the time, the areas that they were will be I would be more successful, or I would be able to really deliver over 100% would be always related with numbers. So then I said, okay, finance makes sense. Because if I would be something with marketing, it would be kind of digital marketing where you work with tons of data and A/B testing. So always with numbers. And then I remember in Spain, I worked for an NGO, and then I was doing risk assessment. So we needed to work with tons again of data with numbers. And I really, that was when I started falling in love with really with finance. So it was not the first love, but rather over time, kind of acquiring kind of this to work with numbers and with finance.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think we all go through that, trying to figure out what we want to do when we grow up. Sometimes I still joke I'm trying to figure that out. So I understand. You mentioned thinking about, finance, fashion, art, those different things. We all have those passions. I have a sister that works in the fashion industry, so I understand that one. I remember helping her a lot through school, getting to cut patterns and all kinds of things a few times on the weekend when she needed help with her projects. So it's a fun industry. And I know the, trying to figure it out. I didn't know I'd end up in finance. I originally did an entrepreneurship undergrad, and in grad school, I fell in love with my finance class. So I can appreciate that one. So, you talked about numbers, talked a little bit about that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you ended up in FP&A? What attracted you to that within finance, right? There's a lot of different areas. There's the accounting, there's corporate finance, there's treasury. What is it about FP&A that interested you?
Oh, I would say I'm an introvert. So for me, talking really a lot with people, sometimes it becomes even not natural. But in FP&A, it was kind of a mix of you work with numbers, and I love forecasting. The best season for me, it's budgeting, where most of the people will hate it. People at my company would be why? And I just love because you can completely have focused time. You create a forecast, you create a budget, you know how much any initiative in the business will influence the revenues or cost. So you can see the beauty of the numbers while you work through forecasting. So then there isn't any better position for in finance than FP&A. And recently I was reading a book that I think it's the art of statistics. And I read a quote there that it was like, numbers without you telling them the story, like they are just numbers. We are kind of like humans. We need to give like the meaning of them. So I think that's why that I really love FP&A, because you can tell the story using numbers.
No, I can tell you love numbers and you're a finance person when you use the term beauty and numbers together. That's when I know I have someone who likes finance.
Yeah. And
Because that's
also,
usually not what you hear. So that's great. That's great that you love it.
yeah, many of my friends would be like, why? Like they would be working in completely different industries, and they are always kind of like, oh, Gabby, with finance and numbers. So they would kind of always make fun.
Yeah, no, I hear you. A lot of people do that. They're like, well, why finance? What do you like about that? Or there's always the jokes about accountants and bean counters, and I think we've all heard them. So I get it,
Yeah.
but that's great that you found something you're passionate about and you really like. So maybe talking a little bit, sounds like budgeting and forecasting is really something you love. So what has you found maybe some of the biggest challenges for you as you're going through and trying to figure out a budget or a forecast and how those initiatives impact the business? What do you find to be the hardest part for you when you're going through budget? Like, what's the challenge?
I think uh, it comes in different layers. I would say the first layer would be communication, because you like FP&A doesn't work only with numbers; you work as well with humans. So then you have to have this alignment, because whatever, like even if you want to show the perfect budget or forecast, you need to understand like how is the sell team structure, like what are, like for example, initiatives coming from the product side that will impact the revenue, like any new features. So you really need to gather all the information, and that only comes with communication with the teams, with different stakeholders, and then you can really forecast even better. Then the other kind of layer, I would say, where I see a lot of challenge is like how to include macroeconomical variables into a forecast. Like what would be, for example, right now, what would be the impact of higher inflation, the interest rates, like the consumer index, like are they gonna still gonna have the same patterns as before, or what had happened like while we were during COVID times? So all of these kind of changes in the market, how we would be able to include them in a forecast. And on a third layer, I would even say it would be accuracy, like how we are able to really improve that. Because like we have right now like a very um, completely different economical uh, um, economy, like sorry for
Hmm.
being repetitive, but in a way that is changing quite fast. And how are we as finance managers, as FP&A managers, are going to be able to even be ahead of those changes and be able to incorporate them into the forecast? And once we incorporate it into the forecast, how we can communicate it back to the stakeholders of what could happen and what would be the decisions based on that we can take to reduce risk or to take opportunities in the business.
No, I think there's a lot you said there, and that all makes sense to me as I heard it. Kind of three layers or key things I saw. Is first, obviously, we have to understand and work with the business, understand those initiatives, understand the structure. Right? I've seen over my career kind of finance build the plan in a silo, and it doesn't work well. Right? Never a
No.
good idea. You really want those relationships with the business. The second, I think it's an area we're all kind of dealing with is what external factors should we bring in? How should we think about external factors? And then the third thing you mentioned is just all the uncertainty because of the environment we're in, right? We've seen the inflation. Everybody's seen these numbers, 40-year highs, UK, Euro, US, right? We've seen the interest rates going up as we try to fight the inflation. You've seen FX rates like the euro, right? If you have
Yeah.
a lot of US dollars, there's been a big change in what that rate is. Like I look at it and go, wait, it's 1 to 1. I should go to Europe now because I went back in 2008 and it was 1.6 to 1. And I was a college
Yeah.
student. I was just like, it just hit its highest point ever when I went. I'm like, really? Can you be any higher for me?
Perfect
So
timing.
Yeah, no, it was a fabulous trip. I loved it. We studied transitioning economies in Eastern Europe. I got to go to
Amazing.
Croatia, Greece, and Bosnia, and it was a lot of fun, but definitely wasn't cheap. So,
Yeah, I can imagine. But very interesting countries as well, and it's also very interesting ones like for example, like the impact that had for the Greek economy to join the euro, like and
mhm.
still like the lagging effects of that, we are still seeing it, and what's like the social impact that is having into the society.
No, totally agree. It's fascinating to see those different countries. Like we got the opportunity to meet with university students in Sarajevo in Bosnia and get to learn about their economy. And it was fascinating. Croatia, we got to tour a pharmaceutical plant and talk to some people in the tourism industry because we were in Dubrovnik, which is really big. So it was fascinating. Greece, we got to go to their stock market and talk to some people at the stock market. So it was really fun to learn these different countries and see the challenges and the differences in their economy and how they were trying to transition and grow. Like Croatia and Bosnia, especially that I don't think either of them are in the EU now. I can't remember if they are. I know they were. Some of them were trying to, and just the challenges of some of the different things they dealt with that they needed to take care of to be accepted, and how they
Yeah,
thought about that and how it would impact their economy. So
yeah.
yeah, it was a great learning experience. I would love to do something like that again. So okay, so we've talked a little bit about forecasting there, love of numbers. Can you talk a little bit about, within FP&A, how have you seen it structured? Like what responsibilities have you typically seen within your FP&A and kind of how the organization has worked?
So far, so pretty much I have been responsible for revenue forecasting. So like within like eBay Kleinanzeigen, we have like different verticals or different types of revenue, and th- three or four of them I have been in charge of. So quite like I would say it's 70% or 80% of the revenue it has come to my shoulders. Each of them it's very different to the other one. So I can tell you we have advertising, completely
Mm-hmm.
different business than what we have for features revenue, and completely different business of what we have to transactions or like the subscription. So it's kind of like within the same company we have total different like revenue forecasting metrics, and type of business. I can give you an example. For advertising, we really take a look at what is like our revenue per KV per 1,000 visits.
Mm-hmm.
For transactions, we have a funnel where we could take a look of like the number of organic ads that we have, organic eligible ads, because not all of them would be eligible for ad transactions and shipping, and then what would be our adoption rate. But there you see I managed like different models, different businesses, and even like the how the business develop over time. Advertising overall, it's like already a very mature business. Transactions still a very young and as well very young team. So even the level of support that it will require, it's totally different. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I feel I'm wearing like in a sense the same hat but many hats because like the type of information that I would need to give to some like a business unit would be completely different to the other one. But I'm still doing kind of like the same FP&A role.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense if you have three or four different business. Sounds like you got subscription, you got advertising, you got transactional going on. And,
Yeah.
each of those have different metrics. I supported a business that was a marketing business as well as some others. So we had subscription and we had a lot of transactional, and each business was a little different and different sales. Some were all inside, some had a mix of field and inside and a lot of account management. And yes, very different in how you're supporting each of them. How do you boil that down and keep kind of those basic drivers to keep track of that? Have you found, that you just focus on the two or three key drivers, or what has helped you be able to manage having all those different types of revenue?
Oh, that's a really good question. So far, it's I would say that it's pretty much how I dedicate my time. So I would say, like, I don't know, Mondays, I would really focus on that business as we take a look at what happened last week. So we
Hmm.
actually work with daily data, but then we take a review of what happened on a weekly basis. So
Got it.
pretty much Mondays would be advertising, Tuesday transactions, Wednesday features, and then I would collect all the data. And then I would see, okay, we were above or below our forecast or budget. Let me take a look where it's coming from. But it wasn't kind of like just one dashboard that could tell me what's happening, because they are very different. They are interconnected in a sense that obviously we are e-commerce in a sense business, because we are a classifieds group and most of our activity comes from our website. So we need
Hmm.
to have like higher number of visits, higher number of listings, or new ads. So pretty much that would be kind of like the first level of in our funnel. But then the behavior from each revenue stream is totally different. So that's why so far I hadn't found one kind of dashboard that would be, this is the metric or this is the unit that could help me with to measure what happened last week.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's rarely one number, right? It'd be nice. Here's your number. Just focus on this, but never works that easy. So it sounds like obviously website. I would guess a lot of monitoring number of visits, traffic, time on site, a lot of those type of things is kind of top of funnel. And
Yep.
then seeing how that filters down to what's the conversion rate, how many subscriptions or how many ads, how many views on the ads, all those type of metrics. Is that a lot of what you're looking at?
Yeah. And then like also you need to partner, for example, for key metrics with other teams, with the analytics team, because they would be like on top of the key metrics. As FP&A would focus on revenue, but in a sense we also need to focus on metrics because that's our
Mm-hmm.
funnel. So
Yep.
you need this partnering with other teams, and that's why I was referring to, as the first layer for FP&A, the communication, because you
Yep.
always need to understand what's happening besides from only taking a look at revenue or cost.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, I think business partnering and working with the business is critical. A lot of people think finance does just numbers. And I'll admit my favorite part of finance is working with the business. I enjoy getting into a spreadsheet and doing numbers, but I also really like, being with people. And so big believer that finance needs to get out of its spreadsheet from time to time. We can't spend all day in Excel.
Yeah, yeah.
As much as there's
No,
days we might love to, it doesn't work that way.
yeah. That's why I also like to structure my days like about like within a week, because then
Hmm.
it would come the end of the week and I would focus on like Thursday, Fridays, pretty much focus work on Excel or G Sheets, like really just doing like modeling.
No, I understand that one. That makes a lot of sense. So obviously, you work with a lot of departments, and you mentioned analytics. Do you work with data scientists, or maybe kind of talk a little bit with the key groups you're working with revenue? I'm guessing sales, probably some kind of analytics team. But how does that work? Kind of how's your relationships, and how do you kind of partner on the data? Because it's so different in every company how they structure that.
Yeah, so we work quite closely with the analytics team, and for me especially, because most of the revenues depend on the key metrics. On then this, like we are in constant, like pretty much when I need to update, it's like if I see something odd in the data, I would be like, okay, my contact person for the analytics team here, like we need to fix this, or like
Hmm.
something happened, like can you please take a look at that? But and that in a sense I would be in a bridge of and very like being a very analytical person and being like a finance person, because some of the metrics I would be able to forecast them myself, because I would say, okay, I already have my models, I would just run them and I would see what's happening into the revenue. So sometimes I also like to have this not dependency into another department to really
Yep.
kind of be proactive and then just see. And and with that, you could also challenge, like, for example, if they would come with different like metrics forecasts, and I will see, no, like, I have done the same forecast, I see a different results, like, let's align. Where is this coming from?
Yeah, no, it's great when you're able to do that yourself and be able to run the numbers and compare, right? Kind of do that. Well, you came up with 2 million and I came up with 1.6. Why are we 20% different?
Yeah.
Oh, you use this assumption, I use that assumption, or you tweaked the data this way and I tweaked it that way, or whatever. There's been a lot of debate. I'm curious your take. There's some people, and I've seen it go back, I've seen it go back and forth in different companies, that, the analytics department should sit it within finance. My last company I worked at before I started my own business, when we got a new CFO, that's one of the first things he did is he put analytics under finance. And the funny thing is that's where it was 5 years ago in this company. And then they broke it out on its own and now they've brought it back in. And there's always kind of this debate because, finance is so data driven. Should analytics and the data sit with finance? Should it sit with IT? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have a preference of where you think it naturally fits, or what's your take?
A very a good question as well. I will say it depends, because I will break it down not like a single group of analytics, but rather I would divide like the analytics in a sense as a general business, and there I would totally agree that it should be within finance. And then if it is like product, like more product business analyst, it should be within tech and product, because like even the job description would be completely different. Like a product analyst, it would be running A/B testing. Like it would give us like kind of the first overview of how the product will like react or evolve and what would be the revenue impact. But it won't, for example, in our case, it won't tell you how many new visits we will have next month. Sure. So, and I think this product A/B testing should be closer to product and tech, because it would bring more value to them. That like a generalist or like a generalist analyst, definitely it would bring more value to finance, and that's where like there we should really work closely. But good question, because I have also seen this debate of where should analytics sit, like in which department.
Yeah, and that's why I asked it, right? There's no right answer. I think that can work well in finance. I think there's times when it can sit, in multiple places depending on the data and what you're doing. The key thing is a couple things. There's, one data source. You don't have everybody using different data sources, and you have the culture where everybody's sharing. That's really the key things for me. I do think, there's a natural fit to finance, like you mentioned, for a lot of it, but it's always interesting to see what different people think about it, because different experiences and different companies all manage it so differently. And it really has been a very popular debate. I've seen the debate happen a number of times on LinkedIn with different people of, no, it should be this way. Well, no, it should work that way. And it's like, as long as it works, that's what matters.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it would be almost impossible to standardize it and to have it like, yeah, it should be finance, no, it should be product or tech. It would really depend on like how the company is structured, like, and what's analytics serving as a purpose. Like, I think that's where the real good answer will lie on.
No, I agree with you. A lot of it depends on industry and company and the leadership, and it's like most things, like you said at the beginning, almost any question you can say, it depends, right? It's rarely can you boil it down to a simple, this is how it works. Yeah, it'd be nice sometimes, but it's rarely ever that simple. You know what it is like. 13 different spreadsheets emailed out to 23 different budget holders. Multiple iterations, version control, errors, back and forth updates. You never really feel in control of the consolidation and collection process. Yep, I've been there. Stop, breathe. DataRels is the financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users.
DataRels takes data from all your company's disparate sources. No organization is too complex, consolidating everything into one place, secured in the cloud. Now all your data finally talking to each other. Everything is automated back into your report in Excel. Cash flow, FX conversion, intercompany transactions, now automated and up to date. Drill down and variance analysis in seconds. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Turn your Excel into a lean, mean FP&A machine. Find out more at www.datarels.com.
So, kind of moving on here, you had mentioned on LinkedIn, you had talked, I think it was a while back, probably about 10 months ago or so, a little bit of an AI initiative that you were working on, trying to improve some accuracy of forecasting. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that and how, that initiative went, how you were thinking of using AI?
Yeah, sure. So everything that started actually, and when I joined eBay Kleinanzeigen, because I realized we have a lot of data, and
Mhm.
we hadn't figured it out, like in a sense, like how to really leverage the amount of data that we have. Yes, we can use Excel for forecasting, but I was seeing some like that we were reaching like the capabilities that we could do in Excel. And
Mhm.
then I said like, okay, what's the next step? And that's where I see a lot of opportunities for FP&A and also for FP&A managers. Because once we kind of reach this point, what else is there? And for me, like I went to really, I didn't know how to code before I went into this journey. And I always try to avoid kind of like known code solution for better prediction, financial forecasting. Like I spent like days on that, like Googling it, and I couldn't found something that would be kind of good enough and would give me like solid results. And then I said, okay, so if there isn't something in there, okay, let's go to the next step. Let's go, okay, what's the next option? And that was kind of like artificial intelligence models and kind of like machine learning. But then you have, at least for my experience, kind of a high adoption. Like you need to really jump kind of like a wall, because you need to understand how like Python code or like syntaxes work, and then you need to understand what like a model will do, and like really without having the knowledge, it was like sometimes even overwhelming. And I kind of took it like, okay, first step, let's learn Python, how to code. And I went, and it was like, oh, it looks like Excel, and sometimes it doesn't look like it, but some of the syntaxes were similar. And then as I took it, and then I went into everything that would be related to time series predictions. And funny enough, I did this all on my leisure time, and I came out to an algorithm like really developed by Facebook, and it's called Profit. Without knowing that also within our analytics team, they would also be using the same algorithm to predict the key metrics. And that was really funny once I started predicting the revenues, and we kind of like, wait a second, you're also using it. And oh yeah, we get like really good results with that. So that was kind of like the story, but in a sense, it was just the beginning, because once you kind of step like of that barrier of like being able to code, you can like really create a lot of more beauty within numbers and within like machine learning models. Like with Profit, it was like a very simple model, like it's more or less like deep learning, but then that would work with certain products that once you have a lot of historical data. But if you would go to like a new launch product and you want to use like a statistical model, it wouldn't work. You don't have any data. But then I just found like so much like information about different like data models, and then it was really just the beginning. And for now, I'm just only using them, and since then I have never stopped. And once I posted on LinkedIn about the comment, I really wanted to to see like what were like the people's challenges, because for me it was a lot about this accuracy and how people were resolving this, and especially if they were still using Excel, how were they doing?
No, a lot of great information there, and that's great that you took that initiative and learned Python. I've toyed with it a little bit. I've never learned it. It's still on my list. In fact, I have a book back here. Maybe I must be upstairs right now, but I have a book I've been reading again about learning a little bit about Python and R. So I can understand that. And I think you mentioned right now, if I remember right, toward the beginning, or it might have been even before the podcast, you're reading a statistics book, I think you'd said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've really embraced a little bit of the data science side of finance, and that in FP&A, and seeing how machine learning and AI can help improve models. And interesting on that, I think you'll find this interesting. I had the opportunity about a month or two ago to talk to a lady. She was the first data scientist in finance for Facebook. She started up their data science organization, and she was telling me about how she'd built some of the models, and they were getting to within 1% of accuracy of their daily revenue. So it was really fascinating listening to her talk about it. She had a mathematics, I think she had worked on a PhD in mathematics or something like that, really smart lady. And it's like, that would have been fascinating. And talking about just all the resources they had at Facebook, right? Huge data science department.
Yeah. For example, the algorithm that they developed, it was by two data scientists. I'm so sorry, I don't remember their names.
You're fine.
But yeah, it's like, for example, I would also say like another barrier, it's like the level of mathematics that you need to know to be able to understand them, because in a sense it would just give you data, but then you wouldn't know like, okay, what does that mean? Why did it was 8 instead of 10 or 100? And I have been also into that journey to really kind of going backwards to really, okay, I did the fitting of the model like this, so that's why I'm coming to this result, and then it makes sense to do like that. And I would be like still like very noob into like the data science, but I find it like really fascinating, and I think the future will lie there, because we have more and more data, and what our jobs will become in the future is really about predictive analytics. What are we going to do, and how can we really predict what would happen? But it's really tough.
Yeah, no. So it sounds like you've really embraced, the data analytics and the data science journey. So as you've gone through that over the last, year or two here, and you've kind of learned just Python, obviously studying some statistics, what advice would you have for somebody who works in finance who wants to learn more about the data science, maybe, Python or statistics, or how would you recommend they go about that? Do you have any advice from kind of your journey that would help others?
I think there is a lot of like free information already out there. Like literally, if you are a person that you could like self-taught yourself, self-taught, you could just like watch a YouTube video, or you could go to Udemy or Coursera. There is tons of information out there. I found like the MIT courses for free on statistics and data science. They are also like, you can just sign up, and they have a lot of good like content, like the classes, the exercises. They are simple to use. They can accommodate to your schedule whenever you want to practice. So I would totally recommend everything that be online, so then you can have your own pace, because it will take a while. It's kind of like learning. I always compare it sometimes to learning Mandarin. Like if you will go this jump from zero to being fluent in another language. So I would see it like that more or less. But everything it's out there, and I would also encourage like not to be afraid, because for some people it will sound that it's too complicated to you need to have a lot of resources or you have a lot of knowledge about mathematics. And I would say like, no, like really once you just do the first steps, you will get it, and then you would come in like in layers, and then you would be able to learn more.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's so true. The number of resources we have today, it's amazing what you can find with the internet, right? That you can do virtually. So appreciate the advice there. So kind of switching gears here a little bit, this is a question we like to ask people just to see how different people have managed through what I like to call mistakes. We've all made them. I've had some huge ones in my career. But what's maybe a big mistake you've had in your career? Say, for example, an analysis that went wrong, maybe a mistake in a budget. And what did you learn from the experience?
Also, a tricky but interesting question. Actually, okay, I have a silly mistake that happened yesterday to me. I had a mistake in a summary formula, and I was so usually like once we predict lower visits, our revenue would also decrease, and I was like, something is wrong. My revenue is increasing, and I just noticed it, and it was like a very summary formula, and I should have known better. And and I literally spent like 10 minutes, and I was like, where is this coming from? Like, I'm checking like the month per month growth, and it's like, but like more in a serious way. Like, for example, for me, the biggest mistake would be like that I didn't went into this data science path before. I really regretted, like, for example, if I would have taken in college more like statistical and mathematical like lectures, I think like the capabilities that I would currently have and the level of value that I would even able to bring into the company would be much higher. Like my goal right now is to really build my own forecasting model and not use like the current ones that we have, but rather like build it from scratch. And I think if I would have started that journey before, I like right now I wouldn't have it. So that's kind of like, I should have, but like with shoots, like.
Yeah, that's a great example there. And it's clear you're passionate about what you do. I mean, I can see your excitement as you talk and that you love the this data science side to finance, the machine learning, the digging in and building those models and working with the numbers. And it's great to see because I can see that passion. And I laugh when you mention the sum ifs because we've all been there where you do a formula and you're spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever a day sometimes. Why is this not working? I used to do SQL. I wrote reports and the code doesn't work and you're spending hours trying to like, why am I getting $1 billion back? The number should be like 1 million. I know something's wrong. So we've all been there. And there are days when it's just like, okay, I'm just putting this aside. I'll look at it tomorrow because I can't figure out where I screwed it up.
Yeah.
So.
And like I spent it like really like too long to really figure it out. And because I was thinking, no, the formula is right. There is something wrong. But then when everything else was correct, I'm like, is the formula wrong? And and there you go.
That's exactly, you go through the process and you're like, and you keep coming back, you're like, well, it can't be that. But then you go through it logically and like, well, it can't be anything else. So it has to be that. And then you start going, okay, so what did I do wrong? Say, yep.
Yeah.
Like I saw a shirt that made me laugh and you'd appreciate this in coding. And it was, it said, I think it said something like roses are red, violets are blue. You have a left bracket on line 32, like.
Yeah.
And anyone who's coded can understand that one, right? You can appreciate we've all been there where it's like, can someone just tell me where the mistake is? Because I'm tired of looking.
For example, that for coding, there was like when I was learning it, I would have spent like hours to really understand why it would come up an error. And I would go to like Google, like error, blah, blah, blah. And then I wouldn't understand anything. And then I would be like, oh my God, like about to cry because like it wouldn't work. And then, but it's like the funny stories that later you can laugh.
Yeah. At the time, you're very frustrated. Later on, you look back and you laugh and just be like, I did what? So yeah, I definitely have plenty of those throughout my career. So I can relate. So, switching gears here, this is a little more kind of personal question to help our audience get to know about you. What is something unique about yourself that you can share with our audience? Something they wouldn't find online? Maybe a unique hobby or whatever you want to share, just something unique.
Oh, I love the sports and I really love art. That's why it was another reason why I moved to Berlin because it's like a very artistic city. And I would spend sometimes when I was even younger, like weekends just going from a gallery to the next gallery, and then like going to museums, and then like photography would be kind of my secret hobby that I would just, you will see me sometimes, I would be walking and then stopping in the middle of the street, and I would be fascinated with something about architecture or art or making a picture, and everyone would be, are you okay?
That's great. Art is a beautiful thing. Do you have a favorite artist or museum or anything like that?
Yeah, like actually, so in Berlin there is a Spirit Mager gallery as well. There is also a new national gallery that opened recently in Berlin. It's like with this brutalism style,
Hmm.
and at the bottom like you have like really nice garden. I went in summer, so like also it helps because I imagine in winter it would be pretty much great and very cold, but in summer it was really beautiful, and they have an exhibition about women in the 19th century and what was their role, so very as well relevant. As I also work as a part of diversity and inclusion group within my company, so I'm always kind of keen to like to see this type of exhibitions and how we can really improve the role of like minorities in companies.
No, that's great. I love, that you've been involved in diversity and inclusion because it's so important, right? Companies, when we embrace diversity and embrace, different groups and welcome different thought and include everybody, you get better results. Plus, it's fascinating. I mean, I love learning about different people and seeing their different views. I embrace that and having those discussions because it often opens my eyes. Like, oh, I'd never thought about it that way, or oh, that's how you experience that. I see it this way. Like your experience is so different, even though we may be looking at the same thing. We interpret it so differently. So that's great that you're involved in that. It sounds like it's a passion of yours.
Oh yeah, true. Like you can see I have many passions, but yeah, it's something like really because sometimes with finance would be like very numbers driven, and like whereas like kind of like the more social part would be like DI, like really what would be, for example, in our case, what would be initiatives that we can do to have like a better belonging, like that will people will feel more welcome in to work in a company. Like I remember a couple of years ago, I worked in a company where I was the only woman, and that was like in a sense very challenging to really make yourself heard or like really express a point, because then you would feel like oh a lot of pressure. So right now that like in our group what we try to do is like really a touch point in belonging, how we can make everyone welcome.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and in finance, most of my career, obviously it's tended to be most men, but I did get the experience in college. I worked for a couple years, and there was about 2 years where of all the students, I was the only guy. It was all girls. And so it gave me a different perspective of kind of, being the minority, so to speak. Because, most of my career I've been in the majority. It's a lot of people, male, and so I haven't had those experiences much as others. So I always appreciate people sharing because I get, there's it really, it really is important that we make sure we're embracing and involving everybody because a lot of people have been marginalized throughout society. So I really appreciate you being involved in that and sharing that. That's great to see. So next question here, as you look over your career and just kind of look back, what is an accomplishment you're most proud of? So if you're in a job interview and I ask you, hey, what's the proudest moment of your career? What's your greatest accomplishment? What you going to tell me?
I would say like uh, the models that I currently run in, like yeah, like when I talk about them would be like yes I did it, like I was able to learn it and to run it, and we get like for example like sometimes I get a request like we need to do a long-term planning and we need to forecast revenues for the next 5 years, and then like really how like if you would do it manually, it would be like such man work. And then I'm like, okay, no problem, we can do it. I just need to run like at least the run rate models, it will work, and then talking and aligning with the team, and then we would be able to build like a case. But that's totally feasible if you use machine learning, and then you just have it like in 5 minutes more or less. But you need to check, like then the checks, the fitting. But if you would just run the model, you could have for the next 10 years if you want to.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know who I'm coming to when I want to get more involved in machine learning. You might get a message from me.
Yes, please, anytime. Like I would be more than happy to like really to talk about this with other finance managers, like everyone. Yeah.
Great. So now this is a question we ask everybody. It's kind of our fun question. I know you've seen the video about this. What is your favorite Excel function and why?
Yeah, like I think that's the most tricky question because like I couldn't decide. Yesterday, before the mistake I had yesterday, I was gonna say Summit because it's like so simple, and then you could just whatever you need in a second would be like, okay, you just get the ball. But after my mistake, not anymore. But I would really choose to use pivot tables. Why? Because once you have tons of data, a pivot table can just summarize everything quite quickly. You don't need to kind of experiment with like crazy formulas. You just have an overview of the data, and then so pivots.
Yeah, no, pivot tables are a great one. I remember the first time someone asked me about pivot tables, and this was back 20 years ago now. We were trying to figure it out, and I'd never used them. And we were trying to summarize text because I had no idea what pivot tables were with my boss. And I was like, what good are these? And then, went back, finally figured it out. I'm like, oh, these are great. Now I get how they work. And now I look at it and go, how did I not understand that? It just seems so simple. But when you're first trying to learn it, it can take a little while. But yeah, no, I in my last job, I used pivot tables pretty much every day. Huge fan of pivot tables. So I can appreciate that one. They're a great one. So last question we want to ask you here. We've really enjoyed this time, and I'm excited, we'll be excited to release this episode to our audience and them to get to learn a little bit about you. But, if somebody was starting an FP&A today, so they're just starting out in their career, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them? What would you tell them as a piece of advice if they came to you?
I would say like, first of all, always have an understanding of the business, like really spend time talking with people. Because as I mentioned it, I think at the beginning, it was like numbers are numbers. Like we are the ones that we need to give them the context and the meaning. So it would be like understand the business and understand where are the challenges and like opportunities as well. And then how do you can understand that? It's like through data. If we want to see a challenge, you need to see what's the like economical environment. If you want to see an opportunity, you need to understand how the industry is working and where is it going to. So then data. So also spend a lot of time having the right tools and the right skills, how you can manage tons of data.
No, thank you. I think that's great as, the advice that I love the first part of learn the business, right? Really understand the business. That's something that's helped me a ton in my career. And then get to know the numbers, get to know the data. So that's great advice. Really appreciate that. And we've really enjoyed having you on the show. Thank you for, carving out some time for us today, and hope you have I know it's Friday, so I hope you have a good weekend and get to enjoy some downtime there in Germany. So thanks again for being on the show, Gabriela.
Thanks to you, Paul. It was a pleasure to be here.